The wind howled through the pines, sharp and cold, as if it could slice through my resolve. I was alone, or so I thought, on a remote trail in the Cascades, miles from anyone, chasing silence to drown out the noise of my life. Then, from the mist, he appeared, like a ghost who'd been waiting for me all along. My name is Eli Carter, 28, a graphic designer from Seattle who'd grown tired of the city's hum and the weight of expectations. I'd come to the Ironwood Trail to escape, to let the wilderness strip away the questions I couldn't answer. About who I was, who I loved, who I could become. My boots crunched on the gravel path, my breath visible in the crisp autumn air. I'd chosen this trail because it was brutal, unforgiving, and solitary. No one hiked Ironwood in late October. No one but me. Or so I believed until I heard the snap of a branch behind me. My heart lurched. I spun around, expecting a deer or a falling limb, but instead, there he was, a man, maybe a couple of years older than me, standing a few paces away. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with short blonde hair catching the fading sunlight. His hazel eyes met mine, steady and unapologetic, like he'd meant to find me here. "Sorry if I startled you," he said, his voice low, carrying a faint southern drawl that felt out of place in these mountains. "Didn't expect to see anyone else out here." I clutched the straps of my backpack, my pulse still racing. "Yeah, same," I managed, my voice tighter than I wanted. "You hiking through?" He nodded, stepping closer. "Name's Lucas Reed. I'm well. Let's just say I'm out here trying to figure some things out." He gave a half smile, the kind that hid more than it revealed. I studied him, his weathered hiking boots, the faded flannel peeking out from his jacket, the way his gaze lingered on me just a second too long. Something about him felt familiar, though I was sure we'd never met. "Eli," I said, offering my name like a cautious handshake. "You from around here?" "Nah. Grew up in Georgia, been drifting a while. Ended up in Portland last month." He paused, glancing at the trail ahead. "Mind if I walk with you a bit? This trail's got a reputation, and I'd rather not tempt fate alone." Ironwood was notorious for its steep drops and unpredictable weather. I'd read about hikers getting lost, their stories whispered in online forums like ghost tales. But I wasn't here to be reckless. I just wanted to feel something real. "Sure," I said, surprising myself. "Just don't slow me down." Lucas chuckled, falling into step beside me. The trail stretched on, narrow and winding, flanked by towering cedars and jagged cliffs. We didn't talk much at first, just shared the rhythm of our steps, the crunch of leaves, the occasional call of a distant hawk. But there was something about his presence, steady, unintrusive, that made the silence feel less heavy. As the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the path, Lucas broke the quiet. "So, Eli, what's got you out here? You don't strike me as the reckless type." I hesitated. How do you tell a stranger you're running from a life that doesn't fit? That you're 28 and still hiding who you are from your family, your friends, yourself? "Just needed to clear my head," I said, deflecting. "City life gets loud." He nodded like he understood more than I'd said. "I get that. Sometimes you gotta get lost to find yourself." His words hit harder than I expected, like he'd seen the parts of me I kept buried. I glanced at him, catching the way his jaw tightened, like he was holding back his own story. "What about you?" I asked. "What's a Georgia boy doing on a trail like this?" Lucas's smile faded, his eyes fixed on the path ahead. "Running," he said simply. "From a lot of things. Family, mostly. They've got ideas about who I should be. I didn't fit the mold." I wanted to ask more, but something in his tone told me to wait. We kept walking, the trail growing steeper, the air colder. My legs burned, but I welcomed the ache. It kept my mind from spiraling. Lucas matched my pace, his breathing steady, like he'd done this 100 times. By the time we reached a small clearing, the sky was a blaze of orange and pink. We stopped to catch our breath, dropping our packs on the ground. Lucas pulled out a thermos and offered it to me. "Coffee?" he asked, raising an eyebrow. I laughed, the sound surprising me. "You brought coffee on a hike?" "Always," he said, grinning. "Keeps me human." I took a sip, the warmth spreading through me. We sat on a fallen log, the world quiet except for the rustle of leaves and the distant rush of a stream. For the first time in months, I felt present, like I wasn't running anymore. "You ever feel like you're living someone else's life?" Lucas asked suddenly, his voice soft but piercing. I froze, the thermos warm in my hands. "Every day," I admitted, the words slipping out before I could stop them. "Like I'm playing a role I didn't audition for." He looked at me, his gaze steady, searching. "Yeah," he said quietly. "Me too." In that moment, something shifted. The air between us felt charged, like the first spark of a fire. I didn't know his story, and he didn't know mine, but sitting there, with the wilderness stretching out around us, I felt seen. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't alone. The trail grew wilder as we pressed on, the path narrowing until it was barely a suggestion carved into the mountainside. Lucas and I didn't talk about that moment on the log again, but it lingered, heavy and unspoken, like a secret we both knew but weren't ready to name. The Cascades didn't care about our silence. They demanded focus, each step a test of nerve against the sheer drops and crumbling edges. I learned more about Lucas as we hiked. He was 30, a carpenter by trade, though he hadn't picked up a hammer in months. "I was supposed to take over my dad's business," he said, his voice tight as we navigated a rocky incline. "Big family, big expectations. But I couldn't stay." "Why not?" I asked, my breath short from the climb. He didn't answer right away, his eyes fixed on the trail. "Let's just say I disappointed them," he said finally. "They wanted a son who'd marry a nice girl, settle down, keep the family name proud. I couldn't do that." His words hung in the air, raw and jagged. I wanted to press, to ask what he meant, but the way his shoulders tensed told me he'd already said more than he planned. Instead, I shared a piece of myself. "My family's the same," I said, stepping over a gnarled root. "They don't know I'm figuring things out. They think I'm just picky, waiting for the right girl." Lucas glanced at me, a flicker of understanding in his eyes. "Figuring things out," he repeated, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "That's one way to put it." We laughed, the sound cutting through the tension. But the trail didn't let us linger in that lightness. A sudden gust of wind roared through the trees, carrying the sharp scent of rain. I checked my watch, 4:37 p.m. The sky was darkening faster than I'd expected. "We should find a spot to camp," Lucas said, scanning the horizon. "Storm's coming." I nodded, though the thought of camping with a stranger, however easy he was to talk to, made my stomach twist. We found a small, sheltered clearing just off the trail, surrounded by dense pines that blocked the worst of the wind. Lucas was efficient, setting up his tent with practiced ease while I fumbled with mine. "Need a hand?" he asked, noticing my struggle. "I'm fine," I lied, wrestling with a stubborn pole. He didn't push, just knelt beside me and gently took the pole, guiding it into place. Our hands brushed, and I felt a jolt, like static but deeper. I pulled back, my face hot despite the chill. "Thanks," I muttered, avoiding his eyes. "No problem," he said, his voice soft. He didn't move away, though, and for a moment we were just there, close enough to feel each other's warmth in the cold air. The rain started as we finished setting up, a soft patter at first, then a steady downpour. We crawled into my tent. His was smaller, barely big enough for one, and sat cross-legged, our knees almost touching. The space felt too small, too intimate, but there was nowhere else to go. Lucas pulled out a deck of cards from his pack. "Wanna play? Keeps the mind off the storm." I raised an eyebrow. "You carry cards too?" "Coffee and cards," he said, grinning. "Essentials." We played gin rummy, the rain drumming against the tent. Between rounds we talked about music. He loved old country. I was into indie rock. About Seattle's coffee obsession. He thought it was overrated. About the lives we'd left behind. I told him about my job, how designing logos for tech startups felt like selling pieces of my soul. He told me about the small town he'd grown up in, where everyone knew your business and judged you for it. "You ever think about going back?" I asked, laying down a card. He shook his head. "Not unless I can be honest about who I am, and they're not ready for that." "Who are you then?" I asked, the question slipping out before I could stop it. He looked at me, his eyes steady, unguarded. "I'm just a guy who wants to live true, who doesn't want to hide anymore." My heart pounded. I wanted to say something, to tell him I felt the same, but the words stuck in my throat. Instead, I nodded, laying down my cards. "Your turn." The storm raged outside, but inside that tent, something was building. A connection, fragile but real, that neither of us was ready to name. Morning broke with a brittle kind of clarity, the storm having passed, leaving the air sharp and the ground slick. Lucas and I packed up in silence, but it wasn't awkward. It was the kind of quiet that felt earned, like we'd crossed some invisible line together. The trail ahead was treacherous, muddied by the rain, and we moved carefully, our steps synchronized. As we climbed higher, the views opened up, jagged peaks piercing the sky, valleys stretching out like a painting. But my eyes kept drifting to Lucas, to the way he moved with quiet confidence, the way his laugh broke through when I tripped over a root and cursed under my breath. "You're not exactly a mountain goat, are you?" he teased, offering a hand to steady me. "City boy," I shot back, taking his hand. His grip was firm, warm, and he held on a moment longer than he needed to. We stopped for lunch at a lookout point, sitting on a flat rock with the world sprawled out below us. Lucas pulled out a couple of protein bars and handed me one. "Gourmet," he said, winking. I laughed, but my mind was elsewhere. Last night's conversation had stirred something in me, a restlessness I couldn't shake. I wanted to know more about him, about the life he'd left behind, about what he meant by living true. But I was afraid of what his answers might mean, afraid of what my questions might reveal about me. "Lucas," I said, my voice quieter than I intended. "What happened back in Georgia? Why'd you really leave?" He chewed slowly, his eyes fixed on the horizon. For a moment I thought he wouldn't answer. Then he set the protein bar down and leaned back on his hands. "I was engaged," he said, the words heavy. "Her name was Sarah. Sweet girl, good family. Everyone thought we were perfect together." My stomach twisted, but I stayed quiet, letting him continue. "I tried to make it work," he said. "For years I tried to be the guy they wanted, the guy I thought I was supposed to be. But I couldn't lie to myself anymore. I couldn't lie to her. I'm gay, Eli. Always have been. And telling her that it broke her heart. Broke my family, too. The confession hung between us, raw and unfiltered. I wanted to say something, anything, but my throat felt tight. "I'm sorry," I managed finally. "That sounds heavy." He shrugged, but his eyes were distant. It was, but it was also freeing. I couldn't keep pretending. I left because I needed to find a place where I could just be. I nodded, my heart racing. His words echoed my own fears, my own secrets. I'd never said it out loud, not to anyone, but sitting there, with Lucas's honesty laid bare, I felt the weight of my silence. "I've never told anyone," I said, barely above a whisper. "But I think I'm like you." Lucas turned to me, his expression soft but intense. "You don't have to have it all figured out, Eli. Just saying it, that's a start." I looked away, my eyes burning. The valley below blurred, and I wasn't sure if it was tears or just the wind. For the first time, I felt like I could breathe, like the truth wasn't a weight but a release. We didn't say much after that, but as we packed up and continued the hike, Lucas stayed close. When the trail grew narrow, his hand brushed mine, and I didn't pull away. It wasn't much, just a touch, but it felt like a promise, like we were both stepping into something new, something terrifying and beautiful. The trail tested us that afternoon. A rockslide had blocked part of the path, forcing us to scramble over loose stones and jagged boulders. Lucas took the lead, his movements sure, calling back to warn me about unstable footing. I followed, my heart pounding not just from the climb but from the weight of what we'd shared. "You okay back there?" he called, glancing over his shoulder. "Yeah," I lied, my hands scraped and my legs shaking, but I wasn't just talking about the trail. We made it past the slide, but the effort left us breathless. We collapsed onto a grassy patch, the sky above us a deep, endless blue. Lucas lay back, his hands behind his head, staring at the clouds. "You ever wonder what it'd be like to just stay out here?" he asked. "No cities, no expectations. Just this." I lay beside him, the grass cool against my back. "Yeah," I said, "but I'd miss coffee." He laughed, the sound warm and unguarded. "Fair point." We stayed there longer than we should have, talking about nothing and everything. Our favorite movies, the worst jobs we'd ever had, the dreams we'd buried under other people's expectations. I told him about the art I used to make before corporate gigs drained the joy from it. He told me about the furniture he'd built, pieces that felt like extensions of himself. As the sun began to set, we set up camp again, this time sharing my tent without question. The air was colder now, the stars sharper. We sat outside, wrapped in blankets, passing a small flask of whiskey Lucas had pulled from his pack. "To new trails," he said, raising the flask. "To new trails," I echoed, taking a sip. The whiskey burned, but it was nothing compared to the warmth of his shoulder against mine. "Eli," he said after a long silence, his voice low, "what happens when we get back to the real world?" I didn't have an answer. The thought of Seattle, of my apartment, my job, my family, it all felt like a cage waiting to close around me. "I don't know," I admitted. "I don't want to go back to hiding." He turned to me, his face half-lit by the fire we'd built. "Then don't," he said simply. "You don't have to do it alone." My breath caught. His hand found mine, his fingers intertwining with mine in a way that felt both foreign and right. I looked at him, at the way the firelight danced in his eyes, and I felt something shift inside me. A wall crumbling, a door opening. "Lucas," I started, but he shook his head. "You don't have to say anything," he said. "Just be here, with me." And so we sat there, hand in hand, the wilderness around us vast and unjudging. For the first time, I didn't feel alone. Not on the trail, not in my skin. The final day of the hike dawned clear, the air sharp with the promise of winter. Lucas and I moved slower, as if we both knew the trail's end meant facing the world we'd left behind. The path descended now, winding back toward civilization, each step pulling us closer to reality. We talked less, but the silence was full of glances, of brushes of hands, of moments where our eyes said what our words couldn't. When we reached the trailhead, The parking lot was a harsh reminder of what waited beyond the mountains. My car sat alone, dusty and unchanged, while Lucas's beat-up truck was parked a few spaces away. "So," I said, my voice unsteady, "this is it." Lucas looked at me, his expression unreadable. "Does it have to be?" I swallowed, my chest tight. "I don't know how to do this," I admitted. "Back there on the trail it was easy. Out here's harder," he finished, stepping closer. "But it's not impossible. Not if we do it together." He reached for my hand, and I let him take it, his calloused fingers grounding me. "I'm scared," I said, the words barely audible. "Me too," he said, his voice steady. "But I'd rather be scared with you than safe without you." I laughed, the sound shaky but real. And then, because there was nothing left to hide, I leaned in and kissed him. It was soft, tentative, but it felt like coming home. His hand cupped my face, and for a moment, the world was just us. Two people who'd found each other in the wild, who'd chosen truth over fear. We drove back to Seattle together, his truck following my car down the winding mountain roads. In the weeks that followed, we built something new. Coffee dates in quiet cafes, late-night talks in my tiny apartment, moments of courage where I told my friends, then my family, who I really was. Some turned away, but others stayed, and Lucas was there through it all, his hand in mine. The trail had been more than a hike. It was where I'd found myself, where I'd found him. We weren't alone anymore, and we never would be again.